Parents gave me up for adoption because I was a boy. My folks gave me up for adoption when I was just a kid because I was a boy. Now, 20 years later, they reached out, asking me for money to fund my sister's schooling. I'm a 25-year-old man now. My story goes back to when I was 6, or rather since the time I was born. I'm the third and youngest child. We weren't rich, but my parents made enough to raise 3 kids. We lived in a small town in an old family house, which saved us a lot. My grandparents owned a farm that took care of most of our food needs. Dad's a truck driver and comes home every 3 to 4 days. Mom works as a waitress. My parents already had 2 daughters when they had me. I was the unplanned one, and you know how parents feel when an unplanned kid comes along. Obviously, I didn't know about this as a child, but as I grew up, I started to understand bits and pieces. It wasn't pleasant to find out I was unwanted. My parents wanted to get rid of me, but the doctor advised against it because it could have led to serious health issues for my mom. My parents, especially my mom, wanted a girl. Her reason was simple. She wanted me to use the hand-me-down clothes of my older siblings so she wouldn't have to buy new ones. My 2 older sisters had a 1-year age gap, so they pretty much wore the same size clothes, which were interchangeable. It was fun for them, but when I was born a boy, my parents were disappointed. They hated my guts. They dressed me in girls' clothes and even sent me to school in my sister's old uniform. It was so embarrassing for me as a kid. Though I was very young then, I still have blurred memories of being bullied for wearing a girl's uniform and having long hair. If I complained about it, all I got was a beating from my mom. I grew up hearing nothing but abuse and harsh words from my parents, most of which I didn't understand then. When I did understand, I hated them. Dad was a bit better than Mom, but he was away most of the time and was flaky. Some days I thought he was neutral between all 3 of us, and other days he was as bad as Mom, if not worse. I won't say I was an angel as a kid. I started acting out when I began to understand their biases towards me and my sisters. They always got the best and I got their leftovers. So I began to be mean to them because, as a kid, I blamed them for my misery. Yes, I was punished for my actions, sometimes quite severely. I had to make my own breakfast and was often left without dinner. Imagine a 6-year-old going through this. There was one incident that I remember vividly, and I think that was the turning point of my life. That day, or maybe that week, I don't remember exactly. I was being severely bullied in the playground for dressing like a girl. I came home and found that Mom had bought new clothes for my sisters for the holidays. In a fit of anger, I took a pair of scissors and cut them into confetti. I know I was wrong, and I'm not proud of what I did, but I was 6, and I was being tormented because of my parents. It came from a place of pain, not evilness. Instead of understanding my pain, my parents considered it a sin that deserved the harshest punishment. They put me up for adoption. They waited for a month, but there were no takers, and that anger was also unleashed on me. I was constantly told how useless I was and that no one wanted me. There were times I heard my mom say she wished she had a gender check and would never have brought me into the world. It haunts me to know my parents hated me so much for something I couldn't control. After some time, when there was no response to my adoption, they started talking about it to their friends and relatives. Dad knew someone in the next town who ran a food truck with his wife. They were poorer than us, but really wanted a child. They were in their late 30s and had been trying for a kid for more than a decade with no luck. Dad talked to them, and they agreed to adopt me right away. I remember that moment when Dad broke the news to Mom and my sisters. They were thrilled to get rid of me. Dad also mentioned that they were poor and I might never be able to attend school. Mom rolled her eyes and said, "Who cares? Just drop him there tomorrow." I stood there, numb at the corner, holding the curtain. No matter how much I hated my family, I was scared and hurt at the thought of leaving them. I had tears in my eyes, but I didn't cry out loud. They were so happy, enjoying the moment, that they forgot I was there. When Dad saw me in tears, he came forward, rubbed my back, and said, "Pack your stuff. We'll leave tomorrow morning for your new family." I cried out loudly when he said this, but I realized it was falling on deaf ears. So I went to my room, packed my stuff, praying that my new family would be kinder. The next day, Dad drove me to the next town. I don't exactly remember the emotions I was going through, but I wasn't crying. Maybe I was just numb when I was leaving the house and throughout the drive. My new family was indeed poor. They had a tiny house with one room. They had turned the storehouse into my room. I didn't mind because they at least made an effort to give me a space of my own. I never had my own room or bed. My sisters had a bed, and I was put up on a cot at the corner of their room in a tiny closet for my belongings. This new room was smaller than our old one, but it was cozy. My new parents, Dave and Susan, were warm and loving. Coming from a troubled household, I had never experienced that kind of love. Yes, I saw my parents showering their love on my sisters, but never on me. I doubted Dave and Susan's intentions and thought their love was just temporary. I tried not to get attached to them because I feared they might also throw me away. Childhood trauma, you know. It took me many months to realize they truly loved me and weren't pretending. Yes, my school was discontinued that year because they moved me here mid-session, but my new parents promised to get me into school the next year. I saw how they worked extra hard to save money for my education. That's when I started to love them back. My adoption turned out to be a blessing in disguise. My biological parents never showed up after sending me to Dave and Susan. Honestly, I was relieved because here I was treated as a boy. Dave and Susan worked 14 to 16 hours a day for their food truck. The truck was parked just outside their apartment, so I wasn't left alone when they were working. I could see them right through my bedroom window. Eventually, I started spending my day at the truck, helping them with whatever I could. When I got admitted to school, I focused on my studies but helped with chores whenever I was free. I was a little over 10 when I started helping Dave at the cash counter. I was pretty good at math. I learned business and accounting from a very young age. After high school, I wanted to run their business full-time, but they insisted I complete my college education first. They funded it with their savings. They were getting too old and weak to run a food truck. I wanted to take on their responsibility the way they took mine, but they assured me they could manage for a few more years and that I should go to college. I studied business and accounting in college because I ultimately wanted to be an entrepreneur. Graduation day was the happiest day of my life. Dave and Susan were over the moon. They even asked my biological parents to attend the ceremony, but they didn't show up. After college, I wanted to run the food truck and let Dave and Susan retire, but they had different plans for me. They had saved a good amount of money and handed it over to me. I was overwhelmed by their gesture. They said they could manage on their own for a few more years, but didn't want to hold me back. They gave me the money to start my own business. I didn't want to waste their money, so I used my business knowledge. I found a small eatery in a good location that was struggling. I pitched to the owner to lease it out to me on a profit-sharing model. After several rejections, I finally got one. I started from scratch, renovated the place, updated the menu to appeal to millennials and Gen Z, and provided top-notch service. The sales skyrocketed within a year, and I made double the investment. 4 years later, I have 3 cafes in town running successfully. I upgraded Dave and Susan to a better apartment and got a tiny place for myself. I had been living with them until now. I asked them to retire from the food truck business and enjoy their life, but they insisted on continuing for their happiness. When I left their house with my suitcase, I never imagined I would be a college graduate, but here I am, running restaurant chains in town. Fast forward to last month. It was a regular day at work. I was busy at the cash counter of one of the cafes when I saw a familiar face. I felt like I'd seen a ghost. It was my biological father. I hadn't seen him in almost 2 decades. He looked pale and weak. He walked over with a wide smile and hugged me. There were customers in the cafe, so I didn't make a scene and took him to the corner. His face brought back all the terrible memories of my childhood. I wouldn't have been able to recount these details if they hadn't shown up in my life again. He said he was so happy and proud to see me doing well. I didn't know what to say. I stood there, numb. He said he was passing by and met Dave, who told him about my successful venture. He said he would bring my mom over the weekend. I didn't say anything, and he left shortly after. After closing up for the day, I went to Dave and told him I didn't want to meet my biological parents, who had disowned me for being a boy. They knew about my troubled childhood. I wanted to run away and hide somewhere on the weekend, but Susan insisted that I forgive my parents and move on. I agreed to meet them on the condition that Dave and Susan should be there with me. So my biological parents arrived at Dave's house. I thought they would apologize for what they did to me, but they had no remorse. Instead, they counted the favors they had supposedly done for me. Mom said I should be thankful they found such good parents to raise me into a successful individual. I was shocked. I wanted to lash out, but Susan held my hand, signaling me to stay calm. I diplomatically said I was blessed to have Dave and Susan as my parents. The meeting was extremely awkward for me. The next day, I got a call from my mother. I didn't recognize her voice. How would I? It was the first time she had called me in 20 years. She was asking for money. She said Dad had lost his regular job and had been working on a contractual basis for years. She had also lost her job because apparently no restaurant needs a 50-year-old waitress. They were struggling to make ends meet. I asked how much she needed, and she said $20,000 would be enough. She had borrowed that money from friends over the last few months for groceries, and now her friends were asking for it back, and she had nothing. I hung up the call, saying I would think about it and get back to her. Now here's the thing. No matter how much I dislike them, I feel bad that people are chasing them for money. Sometimes I think she's just trying to exploit me, but what if they really need help? I'll feel guilty for letting them suffer, even though I have the money. Update 1. Thanks for all the comments and kudos. I got mixed reactions from people about helping my mom with $20,000. I then discussed it with Dave and Susan. Susan was happy I was considering helping my parents, but she also warned me to be cautious. Dave said it was my money, so I should make the decision. He also shared my concern that they might be trying to play on my emotions. After a lot of thought, I decided to take this first and last chance on my biological parents and made the transfer to her account. I did feel good about helping my family even though they had been awful to me, but I was wrong. Or maybe I should say I was right, because I feared they would exploit me financially, and that's exactly what they did. A week after sending the money, Mom called me again. I picked up with mixed feelings. She thanked me for the help and then said, "Your sisters want to meet you. When can you make it?" At that moment, I really felt like my family wanted me back. I know my parents wronged me when I was a kid and I hated them, but I never hated my sisters. Maybe as a small kid I did some mean things to them, but after growing up, I never blamed them. It wasn't their fault. Sometimes I even thought my parents got rid of me because they were poor, not because they were evil. I told Mom we could meet on Sunday and that I could drive to their place. She interrupted, saying, "Why don't we meet somewhere else?" I didn't think much of it and just agreed. She said she'd text me the location and time. After I hung up, I felt uneasy. Why didn't she want me to come home? I mean, yes, it doesn't really matter where we meet, but still, you'd think they'd want to call me home after so many years. Nevertheless, she sent me the details of the restaurant, and it was one of the fanciest places in town. My mind was stuck on the fact that they didn't invite me home. I went to the restaurant, and they were already there. My sisters rushed to hug me. For a moment I was happy to see them after so many years. I was enjoying catching up with them until the menu came, and they started ordering the most expensive dishes. They deliberately looked for the priciest items. When they asked my father what he wanted, he just grinned and said, "Order the most expensive one. My son is a big shot now." That was so petty of him. If Dave or Susan had said this, I would have taken it as a joke. But coming from him, it was just, I would have been a proud son, but coming from my biological parents, this was mean and wicked. There was nothing I could do. I sat there watching them gorge on the food, draining my wallet. Yes, I paid the bill too. Wild thoughts ran through my mind like ghosting them before the bill, but that would have been too severe. I swore to myself never to fall into their emotional trap again. I was cold for the rest of the evening, and I bet they didn't notice. While leaving, they didn't invite me home. Instead, my older sister asked, "So where are we dining next?" I faked a smile and said, "Nowhere," and waved them goodbye. After closing up for the day, I went to Dave and told him I didn't want to meet my biological parents, who had disowned me for being a boy. They knew about my troubled childhood. I wanted to run away and hide somewhere on the weekend, but Susan insisted that I forgive my parents and move on. I agreed to meet them on the condition that Dave and Susan should be there with me. So my biological parents arrived at Dave's house. I thought they would apologize for what they did to me, but they had no remorse. Instead, they counted the favors they had supposedly done for me. Mom said I should be thankful they found such good parents to raise me into a successful individual. I was shocked. I wanted to lash out, but Susan held my hand, signaling me to stay calm. I diplomatically said I was blessed to have Dave and Susan as my parents. The meeting was extremely awkward for me. The next day I got a call from my mother. I didn't recognize her voice. How would I? It was the first time she had called me in 20 years. She was asking for money. She said Dad had lost his regular job and had been working on a contractual basis for years. She had also lost her job because apparently no restaurant needs a 50-year-old waitress. They were struggling to make ends meet. I asked how much she needed, and she said $20,000 would be enough. She had borrowed that money from friends over the last few months for groceries, and now her friends were asking for it back, and she had nothing. I hung up the call, saying I would think about it and get back to her. Now here's the thing. No matter how much I dislike them, I feel bad that people are chasing them for money. Sometimes I think she's just trying to exploit me, but what if they really need help? I'll feel guilty for letting them suffer, even though I have the money. Update 1. Thanks for all the comments and kudos. I got mixed reactions from people about helping my mom with $20,000. I then discussed it with Dave and Susan. Susan was happy I was considering helping my parents, but she also warned me to be cautious. Dave said it was my money, so I should make the decision. He also shared my concern that they might be trying to play on my emotions. After a lot of thought, I decided to take this first and last chance on my biological parents and made the transfer to her account. I did feel good about helping my family, even though they had been awful to me. But I was wrong. Or maybe I should say I was right because I feared they would exploit me financially, and that's exactly what they did. A week after sending the money, Mom called me again. I picked up with mixed feelings. She thanked me for the help and then said, "Your sisters want to meet you. When can you make it?" At that moment, I really felt like my family wanted me back. I know my parents wronged me when I was a kid, and I hated them, but I never hated my sisters. Maybe as a small kid I did some mean things to them, but after growing up I never blamed them. It wasn't their fault. Sometimes I even thought my parents got rid of me because they were poor, not because they were evil. I told Mom we could meet on Sunday and that I could drive to their place. She interrupted, saying, "Why don't we meet somewhere else?" I didn't think much of it and just agreed. She said she'd text me the location and time. After I hung up, I felt uneasy. Why didn't she want me to come home? I mean, yes, it doesn't really matter where we meet, but still, you'd think they'd want to call me home after so many years. Nevertheless, she sent me the details of the restaurant, and it was one of the fanciest places in town. My mind was stuck on the fact that they didn't invite me home. I went to the restaurant, and they were already there. My sisters rushed to hug me. For a moment, I was happy to see them after so many years. I was enjoying catching up with them until the menu came and they started ordering the most expensive dishes. They deliberately looked for the priciest items. When they asked my father what he wanted, he just grinned and said, "Order the most expensive one. My son is a big shot now." That was so petty of him. If Dave or Susan had said this, I would have taken it as a joke. But coming from him, it was just... I would have been a proud son, but coming from my biological parents, this was mean and wicked. There was nothing I could do. I sat there watching them gorge on the food, draining my wallet. Yes, I paid the bill too. Wild thoughts ran through my mind, like ghosting them before the bill, but that would have been too severe. I swore to myself never to fall into their emotional trap again. I was cold for the rest of the evening, and I bet they didn't notice. While leaving, they didn't invite me home. Instead, my older sister asked, "So where are we dining next?" I faked a smile and said, "Nowhere," and waved them goodbye. My wife and I got married about 5 years ago. We hit it off really well, and we always loved doing nerdy things together. She and I were both gamers. We loved anime and sharing our love of nerd culture. She meant the world to me, and I always thought things were good. We fell in love fast, about 3 years before we got married. I met her at a convention, and I thought we were a match made in heaven. We started off talking about our love for Legend of Zelda, and even discussed the latest One Piece chapter. Some people look for their player 2, their everything. For me, that was her. We got married a bit fast and had this really nerdy wedding where we even encouraged people to dress up. But we didn't get a chance to go to conventions due to our jobs and how much they cost. We rarely had the opportunity. I wanted to make our 5-year anniversary special. I didn't make a lot of money, but I made enough to take care of her. I surprised her for her birthday with tickets to one of the biggest comic cons out there. It was one that people dream of attending. She was ecstatic, and I was so excited to go. Now I never did well with women. In fact, I could never pick up when they actually liked me until afterward. It was only after the fact that I realized it. Even with my wife, it took me 3 long conversations on Discord to realize she had the hots for me and wanted to get to know me better. When we went to the convention, things were great. A gal dressed as Slave Princess Leia kept gushing over my stormtrooper costume that I threw together at the last minute. After she left, my wife pulled me to the side, talking about how that gal was all over me. I told her I didn't VGTM to even realize it. I was so bad at reading the room that I didn't JTM pick up the signs. My wife was a little bit frustrated, but we continued on with our day. It was a 3-day convention after all. We went to this meetup, and they TV JTMs when he came in. He was dressed as Han Solo. My wife, who was also dressed as Princess Leia, started talking to him. The two of them started talking a lot more, getting closer. I stepped in and mentioned I was the husband. The guy said it was nice to meet me, but refused to make eye contact. After he left, I confronted my wife. She said there was nothing going on, and he was just a nice guy who liked my outfit. She was the bigger Star Wars fan, so naturally she liked gushing about it. I brushed it off, thinking it was nothing. The weekend continued. The next day, my wife, Lisa, woke up feeling sick and exhausted. I told her I'd go down to the convention alone and be back later. I left, but something about the night before kept nagging at me. I tried to chalk it up to my imagination, but Lisa wasn't VDJ tempt answering my messages. We still had one more day before the end of the convention. I bought her a little something to cheer her up and headed back to our room. When I got there, I heard strange noises, moans and such. At first, I dismissed it, thinking it was just the TV or something. But when I opened the door, there she was, looking guilty as sin. I confronted her right there. She tried to play it off like nothing happened, but I knew better. I looked around the room, trying to find someone else, but there was no one. She must be JTMV snuck him out before I got there. I dismissed it for the time being, but things changed. After the convention, Lisa grew distant. She worked longer hours and always came home exhausted. Whenever I asked if she wanted to watch a movie or hang out, Chev JTMBD brushed me off, saying she was busy or tired. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. One night, while Lisa was in the shower, I noticed her Discord notifications were turned off. She never did that before, not once during our whole relationship. My gut told me something was wrong. I decided to check her phone. To my surprise, the passcode was still the same. I began reading through her messages. Sure enough, they were from that guy she met at the Star Wars meetup. His name was Tom. They were flirting, exchanging pictures, and he even mentioned he wanted to role-play with her. She was all about it. My blood boiled. I angrily set the phone down and pretended like I didn't see anything. When Lisa got out of the shower, she asked me if something was wrong. I lied and said everything was fine, but inside I was seething. I researched how to get a divorce. It wouldn't be easy, but I wanted to humiliate her and make sure she knew I knew everything. I told her about another convention and how I couldn't make it, but she should still go. Her eyes lit up. Even though we wouldn't be together, she was excited to go alone. This was someone I thought be with forever, and she just tossed me away. It was a gut punch, but I couldn't let her on. On the day of the convention, I followed my plan. I did some digging on Tom. They worked together, which made things easier for me. I went to the convention and found them right in front of her favorite voice actor. That TMMs, when my plan kicked in. I watched them get in line and hid behind them. I wore a mask to hide my face, but watched them closely. When they got closer to the front, the voice actor asked Lisa about her day. She pulled Tom closer and said she was having a great time. They shared a kiss and that TMs when I made my move. I stepped right between them, pulled off my mask, and looked directly at Lisa. She dropped Tom's hand and stared at me, shocked. "What are you doing here?" she stammered. I didn't hold back. I said, "I caught you, Lisa. You cheated on me with him." She tried to deny it, but I had the Discord messages printed out and laid them on the table. The other attendees were stunned, watching the whole thing unfold. I didn't let up. I announced to everyone there that my wife was a cheater, and she hooked up with this guy she met at a convention. The voice actor looked uncomfortable and excused himself, saying he needed a break. Lisa JJTM's eyes filled with tears, but I didn't care. I told her she lied to me about going alone. I knew about their meetups, the late nights supposedly working. I even called her friends, and they had no idea about any girls' VJTM gaming nights. Lisa stood there, embarrassed. She finally admitted she wanted an open relationship and thought about asking me. I told her I didn't want to hear it. She was upset I confronted her like that, but I didn't care. We got home, and I packed my things, heading to a hotel. I contacted a lawyer to get the divorce papers ready. Lisa tried to convince me to stay, saying we could have an open relationship. She suggested I could sleep with other women, and she could sleep with men. I told her that Tim's not what I wanted. I wanted her, my player too, my everything. Word got around fast. Someone recorded the whole confrontation and posted it on social media. It went viral. I went through with the divorce and got the house and our belongings. I sold the house because I didn't want the painful memories. I don't know what happened to Lisa. The nerd community knew about it, and it caused quite a stir on Twitter and other sites. Her boss found out because of what he saw online, and I don't know if she kept her job. Frankly, I don't care. My search for love continues, but not with a cheating woman like her. A few weeks after everything blew up, I started to settle into my new routine. Living in the hotel was a bit lonely, but it was better than staying in the house filled with memories of Lisa. I focused on my work and kept busy. One evening, I got a call from an old friend, Mark. He'd heard about what happened and wanted to check in on me. We decided to meet up for a drink. Meeting up with Mark was like a breath of fresh air. We talked about old times, and for a while I could forget about the mess my life had become. He suggested that I should get back into dating, but I wasn't ready for that yet. The wound was still too fresh. We talked about everything from work to hobbies, and it felt good to have someone to confide in. Meanwhile, Lisa was trying every trick in the book to get me back. She'd call and leave voicemails, crying and begging for another chance. She even sent me long, emotional emails. But every time I thought about giving her another chance, I'd remember the betrayal and the way she humiliated me. It wasn't just the cheating. It was the lies and the deceit. I couldn't trust her anymore. One day she showed up at my workplace. She made a scene, crying and pleading for me to talk to her. My co-workers were shocked. I took her outside and told her firmly that it was over. She had made her choices, and now she had to live with the consequences. She tried to play the victim, saying I was being cruel, but I reminded her of everything she did. She left in a huff, her crocodile tears not fooling anyone. Around this time, I decided to join a gym. I needed to blow off some steam and thought working out would help clear my mind. At the gym, I met a trainer named Emily. She was kind and patient, helping me get into a routine. We started talking, and she quickly became a friend. She didn't pry into my personal life, and I appreciated that. One day, after a particularly tough workout, Emily asked if I wanted to grab a smoothie. We sat and talked, and for the first time in a while, I felt a connection with someone. She was understanding and supportive, and it felt good to have someone who listened without judgment. Over the next few weeks, we grew closer, and I started to open up about my past. Emily was a great listener. She gave me the space to vent and process my feelings. She didn't push me to move on quickly, but encouraged me to take things at my own pace. We started hanging out more, going for hikes and even trying out new restaurants in town. It was nice to have someone who shared my interests and didn't have any hidden agendas. Meanwhile, Lisa's attempts to get back with me became more desperate. She sent flowers to my workplace with apology notes, tried to get mutual friends to talk to me, and even spread rumors that I was the one who cheated. It was pathetic. I ignored her antics and focused on my new friendship with Emily. One evening, after a particularly stressful day at work, Emily and I decided to cook dinner together at her place. It was a simple evening, but it felt special. We laughed, shared stories, and for the first time in a long time, I felt genuinely happy. As we cleaned up, Emily looked at me and said, "You deserve to be happy, Jake. Don't let anyone take that away from you." Her words hit me hard. She was right. I had spent so much time being angry and hurt that I forgot what it felt like to be happy. The next few months were transformative. With Emily's support, I started to rebuild my life. I moved out of the hotel and found a cozy apartment. I focused on my work and even started a side project I'd been passionate about for years. Emily and I grew closer, and although I was hesitant to rush into anything, it felt like we were building something special. Lisa eventually gave up trying to win me back. She moved out of town, and I heard she was trying to start over somewhere else. Good riddance. I didn't need her toxic energy in my life anymore. My focus was on healing and moving forward. Emily and I continued to spend time together, and our bond grew stronger. She wasn't just a rebound or a distraction. She was a real friend who cared about me. She helped me see that there was life after betrayal, and that I deserved to be happy. We took things slow, and eventually our friendship blossomed into something more. Looking back, I realized that Lisa's betrayal, as painful as it was, had led me to a better place. I found strength I didn't know I had, and I built a life that made me proud. Emily was a big part of that. But so was the realization that I didn't need someone else to define my happiness. Life had thrown me a curveball, but I hit it out of the park. I learned to trust again, not just others, but myself too. I discovered that even after the darkest storms, the sun does shine again. And this time, I was ready to embrace the light. Months passed, and life started to feel normal again. Emily and I had become inseparable. We weren't rushing into anything, but our connection was undeniable. One night, as we sat on my apartment balcony looking at the stars, she asked me about my dreams for the future. For the first time in a long while, I felt hopeful talking about it. "I want to expand the cafes," I said. "Maybe open a few more in different towns. And who knows, maybe even start a family someday." Emily smiled and squeezed my hand. "I'd love to see you achieve all that, Jake." We spent many evenings like that, talking about life, dreams, and everything in between. Emily had become not just my girlfriend, but my rock. She encouraged me, supported me, and most importantly, she made me laugh again. Her presence brought a lightness to my life that had been missing for so long. Meanwhile, I heard bits and pieces about Lisa through the grapevine. Apparently, she hadn't managed to get her life back on track. She moved from job to job, never really settling down. Part of me felt sorry for her, but I quickly reminded myself of the pain she caused. I couldn't let myself get dragged down by her anymore. My focus was on my future with Emily. One day, Emily surprised me with tickets to a small business seminar in the city. "I thought this could be good for you," she said, her eyes twinkling with excitement. She was always thinking about ways to help me grow. The seminar turned out to be fantastic. I met other entrepreneurs, got fresh ideas, and felt more inspired than ever.